Travis, what's up, man? Good to talk with you.
Hey, glad to be here. Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. I know we were supposed to do it last week, and God, you're a busy man. Yeah, it seems like I think you just said a minute ago you had I don't know like five or six different media appearances that day or something like that. So I know you're a busy guy, man. It's pretty wild.
No excuses. I dropped the ball on that, man. I penciled you in the wrong time, so that's my bad. I own that shit.
Hey,
So
I like that. I like that because that's one of the things that we talk to the guys about all the time. And I'm not always the best, but I do try to take responsibility and just own it. It's funny because I think guys when they mess up, they think if they deflect that somehow people will look upon them more favorably. But in my own life, I found the opposite to be true. Like if I mess up and just own it, people are like, "Oh, okay, I can actually respect that." And then you hold a little bit more clout with individuals than maybe you did before.
I agree 100%, man. I can spot deflection from a mile away, and right then my bullshit radar goes off. I
Yeah,
see lack of responsibility right there.
yeah, for sure, for sure. So, man, how's things been going since you came out with the book? I mean, obviously, I've got a copy of the book, and I told you I went through about 70-80% of the book so far. I'm still reading. I've got a stack of books that's probably,
I
I
bet.
don't know, 25 or 30 books on my nightstand that I'm like trying to get through at any given point. But man, this is a solid read, and it's given me a lot of insight into my own personal life as I've dealt with things as well.
A lot of books coming from your guests.
Most of them, yeah. I mean,
That's why I couldn't do a podcast because I'm not a reader, dude. I'd pass out if I had all those books coming in.
I like reading. I enjoy. I haven't always. It's funny because my oldest son, we tell him, "Hey, you got to read 30 minutes every single day. That's just part of the deal." And man, he just every day, just I don't want to do that. I hate this, and I'm like, I know, I get it, I totally get it. But at some point, you'll actually appreciate reading a good book. Maybe I don't know. I do, anyways. Doesn't sound like you do.
Dude, I hate to admit this. I hate to admit it, but my young daughters are like, "Daddy, read to me." So I'll read and I'll grab about 10 or 11 pages at a time and just turn them really quickly. And I'll
Yeah.
breeze through the book like that. And they look at me, they're so confused because the story doesn't make any damn sense. It's great. That's
How
how
old
I
are they
read.
though?
4 and 6.
Yeah. So a couple more years, you won't be able to get away with that, man. I'm telling you, it's not going to work anymore.
Not at all. Enjoy it
take
now.
advantage of it as you can. I don't know. A lot of guys are listening to this like, what? These guys are dicks. Like, what are they talking about? But if you're a father, you know exactly what we're talking about, man. You do. You know exactly what we're saying here.
Man, I can only read so much about unicorns and rainbows, man. And it's the same book every night too. And it's like, come on, I'm just gonna flip through this thing. Let's go.
You know what you should start doing is just making up your own words and making your own story based on the pictures, and then it changes the book, and they'll never even know, right? In fact, they'll probably appreciate it.
I actually have done that and they caught on. So that's where I got to flipping 10 pages at a time, just fast forward.
That's funny, man. That's funny. Well, so anyways, tell me about what you got going on. I mean, obviously you got the book "Create Your Own Light." I know you're a former military member. I think you've been in as a firefighter and law enforcement. Is that right?
Yeah, kind of a little trifecta. I
Yeah.
always wanted to be a police officer, a firefighter, a United States Marine, and I was able to do all of those things. So I'm a pretty blessed dude.
Yeah. So I guess why you talk about that trifecta? Why not stay on one path instead of trying different things and going different routes and different avenues? I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, man, I'm glad you asked that question. I get that a lot. And so I've always been the kind of guy, even when I was little, I wanted to try things and be the best that I could at something. And I mean, I believe in longevity, but not in any one thing. So my father was a golf course superintendent for 40 years, right? So if he wrote a book, it would be about being a golf course superintendent 40 years worth. And I always told myself as young, if I wrote a book, I want to have multiple chapters about all kinds of different crazy things. And that actually ended up writing a book, and that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, man, that's I can definitely appreciate that. I think the outside of my financial planning practice, which I owned before we did Order of Man, this is my longest career. I mean, we're almost 6 years into this thing, but I seem to I was gonna say lose interest. I don't know if it's lose interest. I mean, maybe it is. There's so much out there, there's so many opportunities and there's so many experiences. And like you, I believe in longevity, but I also believe in taking advantage of the short time we have on the spinning rock and trying new things and gaining new experiences. That's been valuable for me.
Same here, Ryan. Like, so I've experienced, and I'm sure we'll get into this in a little bit, so much trauma through my life, and I've seen so many people expire right in front of me that I know that 5 minutes from now is not a given. So if there's anything that interests me in this life, I'm going to go do it right now. I'm not going to put it off. I'm not going to delay myself any for longer than I need to. If something right now interests me, honestly, I'll probably quit this podcast and go do it real quick. So I've
Fair
always
enough,
been
man.
like that, man.
If you jet off, I know it's something way more,
He's got a
interesting to you than this. Like, I'm not
he's
doing
got
a good
another
job.
career.
That's right.
Yeah, it's not you.
So is that part of your transition into comedy and motivational speaking? I mean, that to me seems like a complete 180 when you go from military, law enforcement, firefighting community to now I'm going to try to make people laugh.
Yeah, so comedy was kind of an accidental thing, right? So when I was going through a lot of mental health issues in June of 2007, I was injured in a fire in South Carolina, in Charleston, warehouse fire that killed 9 of our guys.
Yeah.
I was on the body recovery team. And after that, my world kind of started spinning out of control. And I was desperately looking for something to make me feel whole again. And I was sitting on my couch one night and I saw Live at Gotham. It was on Comedy Central. And these comedians were coming up at Gotham Comedy Club in New York. And they were filming 5 to 10 minute sets. I was sitting on my couch and I wasn't laughing. And I thought to myself, I was a Marine, police officer, firefighter. I was a class clown. I was like, I can do that, and I can do it, and I'm going to get on that show. Well, I started playing around with comedy after that, and 8 years later, I was on that exact same show.
That's
Pretty
interesting. Yeah, that's
crazy.
cool. Were you not laughing because of the place you were in mentally or because it wasn't funny and you thought you could do a better job? Like, why weren't you laughing right there?
Great question. So, comedy is hard. So, if you're not at the live event, comedy's just not the same. I can watch
Sure.
some of the funniest things, and I didn't realize this before that. Now I know. When you're watching it on TV, it just doesn't have that same intimate vibe that it does if you're at a comedy venue having that conversation, watching that performance with someone. And so later learn that. So guys will watch me on TV like, man, that shit sucked. But when you come to the live event, it's a completely different experience.
Yeah, I'm not like totally immersed and familiar with comedy, but I imagine it's a lot like a sporting event. You can watch a baseball game or a football game on TV and be entertained, and it's fine. But it just doesn't compare to actually being in the stadium with the sounds, with the smells, with everything else that's going on that you don't get through a television set.
It's the exact same, Ryan, because everybody on their couch can do it better than the guy on TV, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. When they have no experience, they're not. I've got Theodore Roosevelt's "Man in the Arena," or at least a portion of his speech,
Yeah.
and it's very easy to sit on the man, especially when you're doing comedy, because essentially what you're saying is you're standing on stage, you got the lights beaming down on you, you're trying to manufacture comedy, right? You're trying to create comedy, and what you're really saying is, I want you to judge how good I am at this thing. You're actually asking for people to judge you. It seems to me like that's one of the hardest things that an individual can do.
I think that's honestly why I went into it. That was a big part of it, is because the level of vulnerability is so high. I'd always been involved with these career paths where you were vulnerable. You were at other people's mercy all the time, and
Yeah.
I kind of needed that because when I left the fire service, I was told to leave because of my injuries. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to retire as a firefighter.
Hmm.
But I couldn't do it anymore. The mental health took its toll. So I went into comedy, and man, it's crazy at the places that comedy took me. Now I'm no household, name or anything like that, but for a guy who just got involved in it and was passionate about it, I made it very, very far. I'm still doing it.
Yeah.
But I made multiple television appearances, had a top produced album. I ended up going overseas several times for the troops. And these are all things that I never thought I would ever do. Played top comedy venues all over the world, and it just turned out to work out in my favor, man. Because what a ride it has been. I couldn't be more thankful for that.
Yeah. No, that's pretty wild. So when you were injured in this fire, and I know you lost a lot of brothers in that fire,
Yeah.
were you the only survivor? Were there other survivors?
No, there were a lot of survivors. Several other guys almost were killed. I wasn't on duty that night. Long story short, I know because
Oh, okay.
we're only doing an hour or so. I was off duty. I came back to the fire right as the building collapsed. And
Ah,
we were actually at a golf tournament honoring one of my other best friends who was killed 4 months to the day prior.
as a
Uh,
firefighter as well.
yeah, he was a firefighter. He
Okay.
was killed in a vehicle accident off duty though.
Hmm.
But we were honoring him in a golf tournament. When we found out about this fire, we all took off down the road to it. And lo and behold, I was assigned to the body recovery team that night. And a lot of guys went out with mental health issues after that.
So the injuries that you sustained, were they from that circumstance, that situation, or something else?
Man, I think it was from a culmination. So it was a mental health issue. It
Okay.
was from a culmination of a long period of a long career of traumatic exposure, and all of the events that I'd been through. When in my book I talk about this, um, I was dealing with everything fine. I mean, from killing a man on duty, that I actually took his life,
As
to
a police
pulling
officer?
as a firefighter, man.
Oh, as a firefighter.
Yeah, you were the guys that
Wow.
go to help people, and I ended up killing a guy, and it was just an accident. I didn't mean to do it, but it happened. It's all in my book, and from pulling dead children out of fires, and going to a fire where you could have saved the guy, and the decision you made to work with another department, the guy ends up dying. There's just tons and tons of these stories in my book. But then getting hit with losing my 9 guys and having to be on the body recovery team and go in there and identify them, I talk about when we're dealing with just civilians that we have no relationship to. It's almost like a movie. You go in there, it sucks, but it's a job that you got to do. But when it's your own people that you have intimate relationships with, it hits you on a totally different level. I started acting out a lot at the fire department after that. Not
Mm,
really understanding why. I became a bully. I was hitting people. I was getting in physical altercations all the time, and everything was being
wow.
swept under the rug. I turned into a different person, and eventually, one day, caught up with me when I got into a fist fight with 10 members in my firehouse, and the cops were called, and that was the end of my career.
So did you get kicked out of the fire department then, or were you asked to leave, or how did that situation play out?
Yeah, I was pretty much asked to leave,
Yeah.
and that was a wrap for me. After 8.5 years, I just promoted. I was on my way to becoming a captain eventually, and it was sad because we had help available to us, but the culture back then was to not go get help because we were the tough guys. We're the alpha males. We
Yeah,
can
you're the hard asses for sure.
exactly, and we can handle that. And I grew up that way, and I'd been in all these careers where the mentality was the exact same. I got help, but it was too late for me. So that's why I'm an advocate now, and that's where all these speaking engagements come in, where I talk to these emergency service entities to let them know it's okay to not be okay. And through my story, it's amazing. I go out and I tell my story, and afterwards, I mean, we're there for hours because I'll just start talking with guys and girls, and they'll start sharing their stories, and it's wonderful to see that I'll get these crazy emails that they are going out and getting help that they were not getting. It's still like that to an extent.
Yeah.
But when they see someone else who has been through it and can say, hey, you deserve to get help so you can have longevity in your career, unlike me, they go out and they get the help that they damn well deserve. And it's a wonderful feeling.
Did you, when you were going through this and spinning in this downward cycle that you were in, did you recognize it and you couldn't escape from it, or were you oblivious to what was going on?
I was completely oblivious. And
Hmm.
the thing that changed my mind, when I realized I needed help, is when I was sitting in my mouth crying drunk with the gun in my mouth, dry firing it. And then I loaded it and pulled the trigger, and the weapon didn't go off. It was a Glock. There's no real safety on a Glock. But
Yeah.
I stopped right at the point where it would have went off, and that's why I was dry firing. I was testing fate, and I was trying to see where exactly the trigger would stop before it would go off, and I was going to see if I could do it with a live round. And for whatever reason, I'm still here. But I knew in that moment that I needed to get help, and that's when I got help. But it was just too late for me. But it
So
happened.
did
All of this, started to cut you off. All of this happened very, very slowly. It wasn't like I'm happy, bubbly Travis one day, and then the next day I'm just this angry son of a bitch that nobody can stand. I mean, it was very
Sure.
slow.
If it was instantaneous like that, it seems like it would be easier to catch than this slow, gradual decline, I imagine.
Yeah, I agree 100%, man. But when you have these subtle behavioral changes, you don't recognize it, and your coworkers don't really recognize it. And
Yeah.
that's what I talk about when I do these speeches. You have to be able to identify changes in behavior in yourself and your coworkers. And you have to be able to have the fortitude to stand up and pull somebody aside and talk about it, because that never happened with me. I was slapping grown men in the face on the job, and nobody ever pulled me to the side like, hey, Travis, what's going on?
Why?
My captain was on the body recovery team with me, And to this day, 13 something years later, we've never even discussed that incident because that's the culture, man. That's how it
You
is.
just don't talk about it.
We don't talk at all anymore, but we definitely don't talk about that. And we never did talk about it.
Yeah. So, okay. So this is a really awkward position for me as, somebody who wants to ask these questions, but I think it's important. And I think you wouldn't have written this book and putting yourself out there if you weren't interested in having these conversations. When you had that gun to your mouth, do you think that the reason you were dry firing and trying to find that fire point, if you will, do you think that's because you didn't really want to kill yourself, or like why wouldn't you just? And again, it's really awkward. Why wouldn't you just stick it in
No.
your mouth and shoot yourself? It's really awkward, but I'm trying to get to the bottom of this because I know a lot of guys are dealing with this.
Yes, no, a great question, man. I don't have the right answer, but I can tell you the moments leading up to that. I was driving my car that same evening. I don't think I had the balls to do it. I wanted to do it, but I just don't think I had the balls to. And what I mean by that is I got really drunk that night and drove my car down the interstate at triple digit speeds, eastbound and westbound on Interstate 26 for a long way. And I joke about how the state troopers must have all been at the Waffle House that night because they damn sure were on the roads. I was
Mm.
hoping that I would lose control of my vehicle. And it was one of the most selfish things I've ever done because I put other people in danger. But I have to talk about that because it's the truth. Um, but I made it back home safely. And that's when I walked into the house. I called my mom. I knew I was going to kill myself. I gave her a call and told her I loved her and everything. And she told me years later, after that conversation, that she felt that something was really wrong and I was going to hurt myself. But she didn't want to have that conversation out of fear that it would lead me into doing it.
Mm.
But it just didn't. I think I was just tempting fate, man. And if it happened, it happened. And if it didn't, it didn't. And it didn't happen. And I'm grateful for that because went on to live a very wonderful life. And I'm starting to do, or I have been doing a lot of things that I'm extremely proud of.
Did your mom have guilt about that situation? I'm sure you've shared a lot of this stuff with her. Did she have guilt that she didn't try to intervene or say something or do something differently that evening?
Yeah, we've discussed it. And she said that I was afraid that if I brought it up, it would actually push you into doing it. So
Mm.
she said I hung up the phone and she prayed on it. I'm not a religious person at all, but she said that she prayed that I would be okay. And um, here I am.
Dang, man. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
it's deep stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's, I've talked with a lot of guys that are in very similar situations. Not the same. Obviously, it's different for everybody. But I've personally never been there, so I don't know what it's like. And I tend to be of the camp, and I'm sure you have been for a very long time, where my default is to say, just toughen up. Like, yeah, shit sucks. You had a bad
Yeah.
situation. You saw people die. You went through these circumstances, and I'm not trying to say that pointed at you or diminish that, but I've always felt that way. But I haven't dealt with this stuff, so I'm sure growing up you were kind of that same camp or mentality as well. So how did you overcome? Okay, just toughen up and stop being a little bitch. To okay, I need help. Like I genuinely need help. And how did that transition work for you?
So I grew up with a very tough dad, and he taught me that way, and I'm that way with my children. I firmly believe in we have to be able to shoulder whatever we're going through. Okay, we just have to find a way to get over that hump, whatever it may be. And what I found is mine was through communication. Okay, we
Mm.
were always led to believe that if you talk about these things, you're less of a man. If you talk, if I were to come to you and say, Ryan, man, that call we just went on with those three dead people, it's really fucking me up. We didn't do that in my professions because we were looked down upon. We felt that we were less of a man, or we were weak, or we were mentally unstable and we couldn't handle it. So we did what we called suck it up, right? I talk about this
Right.
in my speeches. Well, we suck it up so much in these professions that we're killing one another because we
Mm.
suck it up and we have nowhere to let it go. And I tell folks you have three options when you get to these points. You can suck it up to the point where your head is going to literally explode and you're going to do yourself some harm, like in my case. It's like a water balloon. Two, when you put so much water, it causes it to blow up. Two, you can cut back on the trauma that's affecting you and like take a different assignment or whatnot. Or three, which is the best option, is communicate with someone. Go get professional help. You got to let this shit out. So if you were to squeeze that balloon and let a little of that trauma out, you know, um, that's what I found extremely helpful for me. It was after looking down on counselors that they were never in our position, holding dead children in their hands,
Right.
holding their burn up friends in their hands. Eventually I had no choice but to talk to somebody, because I didn't want to put guns in my mouth anymore. I wanted to be here. I wanted to be a constructive citizen. I wanted to continue to be a fireman. So I was ready to do whatever it took, and I went to get help. But like I say, it was too late. And that's why now I'm an advocate for that. Those people are there to help guys and girls like me when you feel you have nowhere else to turn.
How did you feel or overcome that hesitation of dealing and talking with somebody who's frankly never, ever, and will never ever even remotely step into the shoes that you've had to fill over the past, well, the entirety of your life?
It's one of those things where you literally have to hit rock bottom. You have to be at the bottom with no hope left in your soul. Nobody's going to throw you a lifeline down, a rope to say, hey, come on up. You have to make that decision for yourself. You're like, if I'm going to get out of this hole, it's going to be my responsibility alone. I need to have the fortitude to step forward and go ask for the help that I damn well deserve. And that's what I did.
And but what was the hardest part in communicating with somebody? And then when did you finally recognize that somebody who may have never been in your specific shoes could actually help you? Right? Because, I mean, very few people have had to go into a burning building and attempt to rescue 9 of their brothers. Very few people have gone overseas and had to protect themselves and their brothers next to them by shooting at other people. Very few people, fortunately, we live in a beautiful society that
Right.
doesn't happen all that often. So the people you're talking with who are going to give you help don't know what that's like.
So you have this fear of judgment before you go in there. And it's, I can talk with my friends possibly because they relate to me. My fear was, how am I going to go in there, have this discussion with someone that I can't relate with? And honestly, that was the best thing that could have ever happened. Because when I walked in, they were just there to listen. And dude, when I
Mm.
tell you I sat down, I was apprehensive. I was like, I don't know how much I want to tell this person. Man, I poured my eyes out and my soul to this human being who later became a long-term therapist for me for over 8 years. She's since retired, but she led me to another therapist who I've had a beautiful relationship with. And 13 years later, I still see someone. And it was the best thing that could have happened because they're non-judgmental. They don't try to put themselves in your shoes. They don't try to understand that. They don't try to live your life. They're just there to listen to you and help you identify some behavioral traits that you may not have recognized yourself. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Why do you still go to therapy? I mean, you seem like you have things dialed in, locked down. Why is that still important to you?
Man, it's constant. Things are not dialed in, things are not locked down, and that's me being 100% honest. I still struggle. I still battle every single day. Maybe not to the point that I was once at, but I still definitely have my problems, and that's why I'm actually just locked in an appointment for next week. You have to constantly do maintenance. It's like your body. You with jujitsu, right? You don't get to a level where you think, all right, I'm good. If you want to stay on top of that and stay better and keep improving as a man, right? This is about learning about ourselves as well. You keep going and you keep doing that maintenance.
So you said you still struggle, you still have hard times. What are your biggest struggles now?
Sometimes I feel like, I had this thing for a long time. I didn't feel like I had any purpose in life. And,
Mm.
when you bounce from Marines to police to fire, and then you get out and you're doing comedy, comedy's fun and everything. But I quit for 3 years when my youngest daughter was born so I could be around. And I was a proud father, but man, I felt empty inside because I wasn't doing what I felt like I needed to be doing in this life. And things got very, very bad for me, struggling to find that purpose. And so that's why I went back to comedy. And now comedy was rolling really hard. And then 2020 came around, and they took my dates from me. And I still have
Mm.
engagements going on here and
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
But a guy like me, I'm sitting at home. When I'm sitting at home every day, just sitting idle. And I think most people in my former professions, they relate to this. We have to feel like we're making the most with the time we're given. And sometimes when you're just sitting at home with nothing to do, you just get lost in your thoughts. And that was very, very difficult for me.
Yeah,
That's
man. I
why this thing came out. I dove into writing my story and how I was able to I wouldn't say overcome, but make the most of the hand that was dealt for me and go on to live this productive life that I'm living. And I couldn't be more excited about things that lie ahead.
Well, and I bet it's very rewarding. Not only is it probably very therapeutic for you to write this stuff out, but I bet it's very rewarding as you hear people who have gone through this book and read it and are now getting the help they need, turning inwards and reflecting upon themselves and changing who they are as a result of the work that you're doing, which is you just documenting your life and the struggles and the ups and downs and everything else.
Man, I'll tell you, so I was so open and honest in this book and transparent, and nobody's doing that. I didn't set out to write this book for it to become a bestseller. I didn't do any of that. I said, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to be as open and honest with myself to try to understand myself a little bit better. So I wrote it, self-published it, and it has gained legs like I can't even explain in the emergency services and in the military
Mm.
because of guys and girls just like me who don't feel like they can express what they're going through. And I literally have gotten thousands of emails and
Oh, I bet.
messages through Instagram. Thank you, man. You have made me realize that I too need help. And I went and got help a few months ago, and I'm a better person for my family. And it's an overwhelming feeling. I'm not saying I'm a godsend by any means, but nobody in the community was talking about this stuff. It just needed to be said. And
Yeah.
so I just stepped up, said it, and it's out there.
No, it's powerful. One of the things that I hear a lot from the guys that tune into what we're doing, because I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Sovereignty, and I talk about recapturing some of the authority and power and control over your own life and not giving it to other people and other institutions and things like this. And there's a lot of misconception about what that means and how that looks. And so I know one of the questions some men will be asking themselves is turning to a therapist, is turning outwards, is going to seek that help, diminishing or relinquishing some of the power and authority and sovereignty you have over yourself?
Yeah, I can understand that. I don't know the right way to answer that other than, if you feel like you're in a place where you have nothing left, that's where I was.
Hmm.
I had to relinquish it. I had no choice because holding on to it would just had me in a very dark place, and it was hurting everybody around me, and I didn't want to do that anymore. And I felt like I have some level of responsibility here to be the best person that I can be. And the only way to do that is to lean on someone, to go and get that help. I used to be the guy in the firehouse. I would tell guys to their face, if you go to see a therapist, you're a fucking pussy. I would do that. And I would make guys feel like if they got help, they were less of a man for doing that because I was hiding behind my own injuries. And that was honestly, it was one of the most cowardly things I'd ever done in my life because who was I to say if someone should go get help or not? If they needed help, man, they should definitely go get it. And I probably kept people from getting help, but not anymore. I think you're more of a man to recognize the fact that you have an issue and that you may not be able to fix it on your own. As hard as you have tried, you may have to go to somebody else.
Why do we do that though, as men? I think that's generally speaking. I think that's more indicative of what men would say and how we would behave. But why do we do that?
Why do we do what?
Why
Refuse to
why do
get.
we why do we both? Why do we refuse to get help for ourselves, and why do we diminish when other men attempt to go get help for themselves?
I think it's a. I think it's a pride thing. Maybe I'd say we're masking ourselves possibly as being more alpha than we really are. I
Hmm.
know that's what I was doing. I almost felt like a. You ever hear about those gay NFL athletes in the NFL? They just they never come out of the closet because they're too afraid. They have this manly image to uphold, and they're out there busting up other guys and stuff on the line. And that's honestly how I felt, man. I just felt like I was in the closet with this thing, and I just couldn't reach out and get the help out of judgment and embarrassment. So I don't have a solid concrete answer for that. But that's why when I do speak, I'm showing people, look, I was alpha of alpha, and I can go out and get help, and you can too. There's nothing to be
Right.
ashamed of.
Well, I think that's probably why people resonate because you're not this little wiry, spindly, emotional like
Beta.
beta. Like you're not the quintessential stereotypical, like, I need help, please help me, and I can't do this for myself. You know what I mean? So I think
Oh,
I think that's why men probably resonate, because they look at this hard ass and they think, all right, well, here's a big strong guy. He's been in the military, he's been a firefighter, he's been in law enforcement, and he's the one telling us that we need. It's almost like an oxymoron a little bit, and that's interesting, because I think a lot of guys view themselves like you, strong, bold, assertive, capable, protector, provider, presider, the things that we talk about, and yet you're the one saying it's okay to get the help that you need. I think that's why it resonates.
well, it's important too, man. I'm a father. I'm a husband now. There's more people that depend on me now than when I was a single man. And
Sure.
I was threatening to throw fire academy instructors out of, our fire academy, or our drill tower, 5-story drill tower here in Charleston. I was beating up our training staff in that training building. And you would think, oh, that's a macho thing to do. No, man, I was fucked up and I was very sick.
Hmm.
And I don't want to be that guy anymore. I don't want to be putting my hands on people anymore. I'm an older man. I'm 42. I don't have no business doing that stuff. Those things happen. I want to be the best provider and husband and protector for my children that I can possibly be. And that's why I continue to get that maintenance, man. So I don't end up back in those dark places. And I continue, I just bought a farm. I don't know if you saw the comment about your tractors a while back. I was envious of your
Yeah,
tractors,
man.
but
Yeah.
I always wanted a farm, because I know the thing that brings me peace is solitude, and I need that. And for me to be the best human being that I can be, I have to do the things that I want to go do. So I bought a farm, and man, I'm out there all the time just doing shit. I don't know how to
Isn't
do
it
anything,
awesome?
but
No,
it's
neither
the
do I, but
best.
you figure it out.
I was walking in the woods. We have a creek back there with my dog yesterday. It's just she and I, and we were just walking around having a good time, man. And then I had to come back to the city last night, an hour in, to be with my family, and I'm already going nuts, ready to go back out there. So,
Oh, so you guys don't live, your family doesn't live on the farm. You have a farm
mm-mm.
independent and separate of where you guys
Yeah,
live.
yeah, yeah. So
Okay,
it's an
got it.
hour away, so I can just get out there when I want to. I'm actually, as soon as I'm done here, I'm going out there.
How do you balance taking that time for yourself that you know you need, the personal time with you and your dog and being out on the tractors and out on the farm, and then knowing, like you said, that you've got a wife and you've got kids and you've got other responsibilities, and you need to be able to project, and not project, but you need to serve other people, but you also need to serve yourself. So how do you balance that?
So that's the $1 million question, and here's the answer. It's you have to find that balance, and only you can find that. When I got burned out with comedy the first time, I was on the road 42, 43 weeks a year for 6 years straight. Oh
Dang,
yeah,
really?
I was never
Wow.
home, and I was
Yeah.
watching my kid grow up. I was in Japan doing a show, the military, and I'm watching my oldest daughter on FaceTime, and I remember thinking, man, I'm a douchebag dad. I'm doing this because I
Hmm.
want to be doing this, and I have a kid at home that depends on me. And then
Yeah.
I had to come back and do some TV stuff in LA, and it's just when I finished that, I had to have a long and hard conversation with myself. Am I going to be that kind of father who's not present, or am I going to be that dad that I need to put this shit on hold and be very present? So I chose to put everything else on hold while we had our second kid. Then when she was 3, I decided to get back into it. And now that the cool thing is, I found that balance. Even when 2020 was my calendar was full, I was saying no to things that I wouldn't have said no to a long time ago, because I was like, I need to be
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, now I go to the farm a couple days a week. I'm home a couple days a week. I'm here for dinner. I see my kids off to school. I go out there for the day, and I'm back home by the time they get home from school, because it's close enough. And I chose to buy a farm that I can get to that quickly, so I can get home and have that balance.
Do you feel like you ever had to sacrifice your own personal ambitions or your career aspirations, and how do you come to terms with that, if that's the case?
And man, let me tell you, that's so great question. I sacrificed a lot, as we all do when we have family. I'm
Sure,
not
of
the only
course.
one that's done that. Shit, my wife sacrificed more than I could ever imagine. But with me, what I was going through, I was extremely selfish, and I felt like I had some really big opportunities out west in LA, and we didn't move. And honestly, I was resentful towards her for that. It wasn't her fault, but that was me being weak, finding excuses, versus me owning that, saying, you know what, I chose. At the end of the day, it was my choice to stay here. You know, um, she didn't keep me from doing that, but it was just easier at the time when I just was really mentally unhealthy to blame somebody else for my problems.
Right.
So it took a long while after I accepted everything, I write about ownership and acceptance in my book, and it took a while, but now I'm fine with the decisions that I made because they were all my decisions. But yeah, I did sacrifice a lot to be here with my family. But you know what? Looking back, I wouldn't have it any other way. Because at the end of the day, this is what we have. We have our family, and none of this other shit matters.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I very much the same boat. I feel like it's almost like sacrifice isn't the right word. It feels like it in the moment because we're giving something up, right? That's the point of sacrifice. You give up something that's valuable to you. If it wasn't valuable, it wouldn't be a sacrifice. But over the long periods of time of our lives, at least for me anyways, is I've realized that isn't actually really a sacrifice because what I get in return is so much greater than what I gave up. So I choose to look at it more of an investment rather than a sacrifice.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, man. Because I'm gonna tell you, I wouldn't trade these hugs that I get from these little
Of
girls.
course.
Man, look at this. I got right here on my desk these little "I love you" notes because
It's
I was in
awesome,
Myrtle
man.
Beach performing this week, and
That's
Myrtle
awesome.
Beach is an hour from my house, and I had to go up there and perform for 5 nights or 4 nights. And while I was gone, I got multiple. I come home to this shit on my desk, all these little letters and
Yeah,
stuff. And
man.
I mean, you can't trade that for the world. And there's no place I'd rather be right now. But Daddy does have to go out every once in a while and get his head right. And comedy's what does that for me. I step away for a couple of days and I go have my fun and do my thing, make people laugh, and then I come back home and I'm dad.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like an imposter? You look at your life and you look at your history and you think, okay, well here's where I was. And I think sometimes we have a tendency of attaching our identity to who we used to be 5, 10,
Yeah.
20, 30 years ago. And we can't ever, like you talked about ownership and acceptance, we don't ever let it go to the point where it's like, okay, that was me, yes, but it's not me now. And if we can't let it go, what I've seen a lot of guys fall into is imposter syndrome. Like, who am I to tell people how to overcome this shit when I'm in the thick of it? Who am I to try to make people laugh when I might feel miserable inside? And so we have this imposter syndrome, and it keeps us from doing what could really serve us and other people.
I don't feel like an imposter because I've lived this stuff and I've seen the fruits of my labor from it. I've seen
Mm,
the effect that it has when I speak to, the National Fraternal Order of Police, in Nashville. I spoke to them very, very open and as a matter of factly, and they came up one by one, and guys and girls were pouring their hearts out. I see the effects that it has, and I think I'd be more of an imposter if I sat here and told you I didn't still have problems, and I've beat this thing. That would be, I think, me being an imposter. Now, I'm an average human being. I used to be all these things. I'm comfortable with who I am. I'm actually proud for once, and this is the first time I've ever said it. I'm proud of the man that I've become and who I am and what I stand for. Because for over a decade, man, I was very, very unhappy with who I was. And now finally I feel like all these things in my life have happened. I'm not a spiritual person. I'm not a religious person, but I feel like my life has been redirected to put me exactly where I need to be doing what I need to be doing. And you know what? It may redirect me again in another year or two, and I may be doing something else. I may be building toys for some fucking Christmas company. Who knows? And when I do it, I'm gonna do the best that I can
when
with it.
when that goes white, you can definitely play that part and be Santa Claus or something, right?
Yeah, I can be claws, man. That's right. So I'm just trying
So
to
it's
enjoy the time that I have.
it's interesting because you're using this term redirect, but you're using it as a way of like some third party or third entity, but you're also not saying you're not spiritual. So am I misunderstanding? Like, how do you define that?
I don't know. I don't know, man. I know it sounds crazy because I hear myself saying it. Maybe I am spiritual. I'm not acknowledging it, or I'm not accepting that. And maybe I should. Um, but I look back, and I talk about this in my book. I had a lot of different shitty things happen, and you could easily say, man, I should have just given up or whatever, but I never did. And all these big events started happening, and it led me to this really amazing, beautiful life that I have. Had any of that stuff not happened, I wouldn't be sitting here talking with you, and I wouldn't be holding up these love letters from the kids. You know what I mean? So a lot of times when these shitty things happen, our first inkling is to have a pity party, to feel sorry for ourselves and try to figure out, why did these things happen? Well, you know what? It fucking happened. Press on, right?
Yes.
That that's it. We're
That's
never
it.
going to know. We can ask why all day long. We're never going to have the answers. And honestly, if you had the answer, you wouldn't be happy with it. So why ask it?
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. I do think that we just naturally have a desire to figure things out because I think we're looking for patterns. And I think we're like, for example, if we had a shitty upbringing, maybe parents weren't around or they were abusive or, some tragic situation or circumstance, we would look for a reason for it as a defense mechanism, right? Because if it's me and I did these things and it's my fault, then if I behave and do something differently, then that won't happen to me. And so I think we're looking for patterns and we're looking for self-preservation information so that we don't fall into those same traps that we did before.
You're right. And I heard a shitty excuse the other day. I was working. I was at this comedy venue, and one of the staff that was there, she was in a bad mood. And I said, "Girl, what's wrong with you?" And she goes, "Oh, I'm just in a bad mood. I'm a mean person." And I said, "Well, why are you so mean?" She goes, "Oh, you don't understand my upbringing. I had to raise
Mm,
myself at 14, and my parents treated me like shit." And I was sitting there thinking, man, and you're still putting that vibe out? Like, when are
yeah.
you going to stop feeling sorry for yourself and get the fuck over it and press on and have a great life? Because you're pulling yourself down. Nobody else is even pulling you down. You're pulling yourself down.
Yeah, it's interesting because all of that stuff she was saying, and I don't know the nuance of your conversation, but there's probably some truth and validity to it, right? She probably had parents who weren't around. Maybe they were abusive. Maybe they were into drugs. Who knows? We're making all kinds of stuff up at this point. But I know people come from that background. And so there's validity to the story we're saying. And still, at some point, as a grown-ass adult, you have to say, and you said this earlier, what happened happened, and that was the deal. I can't go back and change it. I can't become somebody different. I can't experience something different than I did before. I just have to put a stake in it and say, okay, that's what happened. Time to move on.
Time to move on.
How did you do that when? So let me say this a little differently. With my time in the military service, I felt a tremendous sense of worth and purpose and significance. I think a lot of that is probably trained into you, right, through our training and things like that. But there's a lot of just satisfaction that comes with the work that's being done, and a lot of it is external, like it's shared with you, and then you just adopt it and embrace it, and you assimilate to it. That's how I felt in the military, anyways. And then you leave. So you're no longer in the military, or you're no longer with the police department. You're no longer in firefighting. Now you're on your own, and you have to begin to find some of that purpose and mission. But I can't imagine you just went straight from, oh yeah, they kicked me out of the fire department or politely asked me to leave, and now I'm going to do comedy. And like, no steps in between.
So,
Like,
fortunately for me, I was already doing comedy while I was still at the fire department. And
okay,
I worked
got it.
Bro, I worked for 2 years doing comedy. That was my side business. So a lot of guys cut grass and are electricians and plumbers and shit.
Sure.
I did two things. I owned a limousine company and I did comedy for fun. And the cool thing about the comedy was I got really fortunate and caught some really big breaks early on. So when I was asked politely to leave the fire service, man, I stepped out and I was gone. I had an agent and I was gone. And I never looked back. And I got lucky, honestly, because had that have not happened, I would have just been at bars doing these little bar shows, begging for whatever scraps I could get money wise. But I was hurled into it, and when I was ready, I called my agent and I said, "Hey, look, this just happened. I don't have a choice. Make me as busy as we can possibly do." He's like, "Okay, boom, 46 weeks a year, here we go."
Wow.
So
So so you talked about those early breaks. Was that your agent that set those up for you? Like, how did those come about?
that was all me. And when I say breaks, it wasn't anything phenomenal, and it was
It
in the
wasn't like
comedy
you were going to go
world.
open for Joe Rogan or something.
No, I actually ended up opening for Kevin Hart, not Joe Rogan, but
Maybe even better in the comedy world, frankly.
I mean, Joe's great, but
No
Kevin,
doubt.
Joe, Kevin was also great, and this is right before Kevin really, really made it big. I mean, he was right there on the cusp. He was about to break. For me, what I'm talking about is for just being an open mic comedian, doing bar shows for fun and doing a couple of clubs every once in a while, to doing clubs full time, bypassing the open mic status, going straight to what we call a feature act, who is the middle guy. I did that in 2 years, and I was the middle guy within a 2-year period, and that just
How
doesn't
long would
happen.
that traditionally take for somebody, in a standard route?
I know guys that they're 10 years in, barely the middle guy, barely.
Wow. Yeah.
And then there's some that they'll do it in 6 or 5, but I did comedy for, here's the truth is, I did it for about 4 months before I got my first feature work at a real club. And it was because I won a comedy competition. Had it not been for that, my road would have been different. But as soon as I got that first feature spot, the headliner I was working with liked me, and he started turning me on to all these other places, and I started getting noticed more. And before I knew it, I was working a lot on my own, and then I had an agent working with me that got me more work. So it just kind of,
Yeah.
steamrolled from there.
So why you? I mean, look, there's guys, like you said, have been doing it 10 years. So what is it about you? Like, you don't have to be humble or bashful here. Like, what is it about you that it's like, I did it in 6 months?
I think with me, I talk this didn't happen right away, but I talk openly about my life as being a fireman, being a police officer and a firefighter, and very blue collar, about growing up in the South and being a husband and stuff like that. And I think that all that stuff is extremely relatable to my target audience, who is emergency responders, supporters of emergency responders, military, supporters of military. Shit, there's 28 million veterans in this country alone. You know what I mean? And think about every one of them. Yeah, something like that. It's some astronomical number. Every one of them has a family member, that supports military. So with all of that being said, I think that they just find these little snippets of things that they relate to. I piss off a lot of Navy people with my jokes.
By design or just unintentionally? Yeah.
No, man. Marine Corps and Navy, we butt heads all the time. I love telling Navy jokes. Shit, I'll be in Pensacola, Florida coming up next week. I can't wait to get down there. I think there's a bunch of tickets sold, and some of them, good bit of them are Navy.
That should be interesting. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not totally familiar with the comedy scene. I actually have seen Joe Rogan perform in California. This was several years ago, and I've seen some other live performances. And it just seems to me it's like your whole goal is to piss off the right group of people. That's kind of what it seems like to me.
In a fun way. If
you do
it in a fun way, great. But yeah, you piss them off in the wrong way, you definitely need to leave out of the back entrance and never look back.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think comedians are, well, I mean, some of them I'm sure, but from what I've seen are not mean-spirited. It's just, This is how we deal with things. This is how we talk about taboo subjects that the rest of society won't talk about. We make fun of it and we mock it and we poke at it so that it alleviates some of the pressure because nobody else is willing to talk about it.
Yeah, man. And you know what's crazy is, man, with everything going on, with all the butt hurtness out here and the sensitivity towards freedom of speech and all that, a lot of guys they're kind of pulling away from that, especially if you're not a known guy, because right now things that you say can make or break your career. I'm not trying to be a famous comedian. Look, I do this for me. I do it for fun, so I don't give a shit if anything ever happens with it or not. I do the best that I can do everywhere I go, and I just enjoy doing it, right?
Yeah.
Having said that, I learned with what I do, I talk about me the entire time. But while in doing so, I talk about other people. Like I rope other branches of the military into it. I rope other parents into it when I'm doing, jokes about my kids and shit. Because I don't pretend to be like I've been this wonderful father. Man, I was hard to deal with, especially when my kid was a toddler. I had this fucking 20-minute joke on just being a dad of a toddler and how I'm not the guy you want locked in a room with a toddler arguing about what color popsicle they did or did not get, because I'm fucked up. So I talk about all kinds of stuff like that, and it's a good time.
Yeah, I could see how it definitely. It's so stupid. There's no other way to say it. It's just so stupid that in the world of comedy, that even something a comedian would say is out of bounds or out of line. I'm like, that's the point. The point is they are allowed to go out of bounds where nobody else is. So why are we limiting these people? Please let us have an outlet.
because it's so cool to have your feelings hurt these days.
Yeah, that's
That's
true.
all it is. Everybody
That's
wants to
true.
be offended. Everybody wants to be offended.
Yeah, I think I made a post on Twitter the other day, and I said, that's I'm just paraphrasing here, but something along the lines of we've got to this point where it's more important to feel virtuous than to actually be virtuous. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of virtue points coming through signaling and projecting and feeling slighted and being a victim rather than actually overcoming that, strengthening your resolve physically, mentally, emotionally, a lot of the things that we've talked about in this podcast. That's where the
You
real
know,
virtue comes from.
not to be dark, but I think so many people have not experienced true hardships. You know what I mean? And by saying that, I mean, you would really find out what's important in life and what's not. Something some fucking comedian says is not important.
Right.
It's just
Right.
good fun because 5 minutes from now we could all be dead. That's how I live my life. It's like, hey, does this really matter right now? My
Yeah, it's a
kids,
good
my
point.
kids will get butt hurt over something, and I don't drive that into them. But I sit there and I think about it. I'm like, oh my god, these little fuckers don't even get it. We could all be dead right now,
Yeah.
and they're arguing over a goddamn blow up unicorn doll for Christmas. Like this is, you know,
Oh, I think you and other military members and law enforcement officers, LEOs, that sort of thing, have obviously a different perspective on it, and I think that's where a lot of the dark humor comes from. You see a lot of these military members, and my military experience, it was the National Guard. I did one deployment overseas, so it isn't as extensive as yours or a lot of people who are listening, but I got familiar with the idea of dark humor and making light of it as a coping mechanism, because I mean, imagine having to deal with, like, intimately deal with your own mortality every single minute of every single day. Like, if you aren't a little bit twisted and distorted in the head, you're not going to survive that. There's no way.
bro, I had a dark sense of humor, and it almost cost me my life. So I couldn't imagine if I didn't. I mean, I
Right.
remember we would be on calls joking about I want to say this one's in my book about a lady that she died having sex, and it was actually her gardener. She was cheating on her husband. You can't make this shit up, but long story short, he nailed her to death, and we had to go to this call, and it was fucking hilarious to us, or to some of us. We had a new guy on the crew that was the first time he'd ever experienced death, and when we started joking about it, he couldn't handle it. So I
Yeah.
broke it off in his ass and told him, hey, if you can't handle this shit, there's the door. This job will it'll fucking eat you up and spit you out.
For sure, man.
So
Like, how do you deal with that? How do you walk into a scene like like that?
oh, I
Or
left out all the dildos and everything that was
yeah,
there,
I'm sure.
Ryan. I was trying to. I was paraphrasing the story real quick, but I mean, there was dildos and there was a porno playing. It was just out
Oh,
of a movie. It
jeez.
was good stuff. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, I mean, look, how do you walk into a situation like that, or even worse, like your situation with your brothers who were killed in that fire, and like, you got to have an outlet. Otherwise, you talked about it, you'll just explode the water balloon, man. You'll explode and you'll kill yourself, literally, figuratively. I mean, it doesn't go well if you can't have that outlet.
You know what people don't understand is the rate at how many first responders are killing themselves. Because we all hear the military, the 22 a day thing. Everybody knows
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
Everybody knows the military has its own issues. But what a lot of people have been overlooking for many years is the emergency services. You got to think emergency services, they're not in combat 1 or 2 days overseas. They're in combat every single day here where they live.
Yeah.
They have to
Sure.
live, thrive, and work in these environments and raise their children in these same environments that fuck them up and pretend that they're okay all the time. And that's why these guys are walking out in the woods shooting themselves. These girls, we had 2 guys in Charleston recently, firefighters kill themselves. I mean, this was last month. I mean, it happens everywhere at astronomical rates. I had a guy after my, what was it, the police conference that I did for the National Fraternal Order of Police. He pulled me aside and he's like, man, we just had 2 officers in Southern California, the department he was in, just killed themselves. One of them drove his fucking car into the substation and shot himself. You know,
Mm.
it happens everywhere because they just don't feel like they can get the help or they're too ashamed to go get it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you doing your part to break that stigma because there is a stigma there. And it's guys like you who are going to help break that stigma where, as I said earlier, you're not that, that quintessential or stereotypical guy that, needs the help. You're somebody who seems well put together and strong and masculine. And so these are the types of individuals that need to step up and say, it is okay that you go get help. In fact, it's not only is it okay, it's encouraged. It will make you a better human being.
Man, honestly, it's been the honor of my lifetime doing this because I tried to do it in 2016 when a friend of mine asked me to speak to 200 fire service chaplains about mental health. And I
Mm-hmm.
tried, but I wasn't ready. And I broke down and I cried and I couldn't even finish. I was crying in front of a room full of
You
grown
cried
men.
on stage.
Dude, when I tell you I was crying, I mean, boogers were in my face because I was
Mm.
reliving that moment for the first time. I'd never talked about it. And I shut down after that. Never wanted to do it again. But in early 2019, when I started doing comedy, my friend saw that I was back on the road and he asked, "Do you want to do this again? You want to try it?" So I went to
Same
Jacksonville,
friend that
Florida.
invited you the
Same,
first time?
same friend.
Wow.
So I went to Jacksonville, Florida, and I talked to some firefighters down there. Same thing. I started crying, but I sucked it up and I got through it. And before I knew it, I talked for an hour and a half. And the impact that it had on those people, I saw it right then. I go, if I don't start talking about this more, I'm complicit. I could possibly be complicit in some of my brother and sister's deaths. I was like, because I'm willing to do this now. I have a story that's very authentic that relates to so many of us that if not me, who, you know?
Mm.
And so I started doing it more and more and more. And now I don't get boogers in my face when I want to talk about it. But um, it I prefer doing that over comedy all day because comedy is just, a bunch of dick jokes, a bunch of people drinking. We're having a good time. But afterwards, everybody leaves. Who did you may have helped somebody with some laughs, but what did you really do?
Yeah.
I filled my void. Yeah, I got some laughs. Y'all come and watch me be this puppet on a string and have a good time for you, right? Um, but when you talk to people and you can actually see the light bulb go off in their brain, like, man, maybe I just helped you stay here for your children, for your family, you know? That's an amazing feeling. And it's happened time and time again when I get to go talk to these individuals.
I like this concept you're talking about where you feel complicit in, somebody's potential demise if you have the information and you have the resources and you don't share them. I think that wraps up masculinity just perfectly actually.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about serving other people. We talk a lot about being capable to do that, to serve others. And if you, in my experience, in my perspective, if you notice somebody around you, whether it's a neighbor or a family member or a brother who's struggling and you have the means to help and you don't, that's like you said, you're complicit in that. Now you're now a partner in that, and you could have done something. You could have served, and you didn't. And it takes courage. And I understand it's scary. You certainly understand it's scary, and yet that is our responsibility as men.
Well, that's why I'm willing to put myself out on multiple platforms to be judged because I don't really care. You judge me on that all you want. I don't, comedy is one thing, but this, I know what this is doing. And this episode right now, you don't even have to be a military person. You don't have to be a first responder. There's other people who have mental health problems, who've experienced trauma on their own, who just need to hear a message, maybe for it to resonate. Like, hey, maybe I too can go get help, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. And it'll
Right.
happen. It'll happen as soon as this airs. It will resonate with one person, and if that's enough, man, I feel like I have this tangible asset now that I'm not going to go to sleep on. And I can't. It's not like I'm pretending to be Superman. Like I can go out there and save everyone. But if given the opportunity, you graciously having me on your show today, talk about this, I'll do it.
Well, it's not going to serve one. It's going to serve thousands of men. I know for a fact it's going to serve thousands of men who are listening. I do have to ask you, what'd you do with your limousine service? I'm really curious
I'm glad
about
you
that
said
because
that.
that's strange, man. I'm like, all right, hold up. We got to go back to this limousine thing here for a second.
So while I was a fireman, I was actually going to night school. I always wanted to. Remember, I told you if there's ever something I want to do, I do it, and I go 110 miles an hour with it. So
Yeah, I like that. I can
I was
resonate
a
with that
young
for
man,
sure.
and like many young men, I was into cars, and I was standing outside of a fire station one day, and I saw a limousine. It was actually multiple days. I kept seeing this limousine go by, and I asked one of my friends. I said, "Man, what's going on with that limo?" And the guy said, "Oh, that's a limousine company. They have a warehouse back there."
Hmm.
And then I started doing the math. I was like, "Well, this motherfucker didn't just go into the car wash. He's making trips, right?"
Yeah.
And so I started looking into it. And after I sold my first piece of real estate, I bought my first limousine. But I knew nothing about business. I was an idiot. I used all of my money to buy this fucking car, not anticipating maintenance, gas,
Yeah, yeah, of
oil
course.
change, nothing.
Why would you think about that stuff?
Marketing. Let me tell you, Ryan, I didn't even have insurance for the first three months that I operated. I was so
Dang.
gangster. Oh yeah. I was rolling around downtown picking up people like a taxi in Charleston before the economy crashed.
Yeah.
And I'd get, 10, 15 people in there. I'd make $100 just taking them down the street because they wanted to ride in the limo.
That's
No
all. So they weren't
insurance.
like going to the bar or anything. They're like, hey, yeah, we want a limo. Here's a limo. So let's do it.
They would hop in. We'd do a couple laps and drop them off in front of a bar. Ended up getting Ben Roethlisberger one night. They
Oh,
hired me
really?
for for a quick shuttle. And that's when all his stuff was going on. And I was like, I
Yeah.
know this is bullshit because I saw the women chasing him out of the bar. And he was like beating them off. I was like, come on, man. Ben,
Yeah.
Ben doesn't need to do that. So anyway, I finally got up and running legitimately, and I had it for 3 years, man. I had 5 limousines rolling full time here in Charleston. I had all police officers and firefighters for my drivers, all of them. And then I just up and sold it. And I got lucky. I sold it in February of 2008, just before the recession.
Yep.
And so I got lucky. And so with my fist full of money, I just did something else, and it was kind of neat. I just got bored with it after 3 years. I was like, oh, I'm done.
Yeah. Well, I could not bring that up. I'm like, all right, I got to know about the limos here, man. This is important stuff. This is critical in the storyline.
Bro, the stories I could tell you about those limos, we're gonna have to turn these cameras off.
Maybe we'll do a
Cops and
round two.
firemen,
We'll do an
remember?
explicit version or something like that
Yeah, yeah.
for round two.
I have to change names to protect some people, boy, because cops and firemen were my drivers. I can't throw them under the bus.
Yeah, yeah, you gotta protect them for sure. But man, I can't imagine some of the stuff that went down. Could make for a very interesting. Well, I mean, look, good fodder for your jokes, anyways, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've never used those, but I could. I mean, we literally had stretch Hummers at my firehouse. When you see a fireman, you don't think, what the fuck are all these limousines doing at the
Right,
firehouse? But my
right.
guys would come up and they'd shuttle them out, they'd bring them back, and I'd wash them out in the parking lot and everything. And call them up like, hey, you got another trip? Come on, let's go. We had a big 30-person party bus at one point.
Dang.
Stupid. It was
Oh, that's
crazy.
crazy, man. It's awesome.
Fun life.
All right, brother. Well, I appreciate you. Let us know how we can connect with you, pick up a copy of the book, all of that stuff. Where do we go?
Yeah, please. So, like I say, I can't do what I do without people. And so, if you're interested, I just ask you to give me a follow on Instagram at my name, Travis Howze, Howze. And I couldn't be more appreciative because the more people that learn about what it is I do, hopefully it'll help somebody down the line. I was just I'm proud to say I can't give out the monetary value right now because we're still undecided right now. But there's a significant amount of money that was just raised for a college fund for underprivileged kids through what
Mm,
we do, and I'm excited about that. It just hasn't been the money's been raised. It just hasn't been confirmed on how much it was yet. So,
sure.
so we do some good things like that, and that's actually going to my buddy Lewis Mulkey's college fund. My best friend who was killed in that fire. So
Mm,
his widow set up a college fund for underprivileged kids in his honor. Um, and outside of that, my book Create Your Own Light, Finding Post Traumatic Purpose. It's on Amazon, and you can go on there and check out the reviews. It has hundreds of reviews. It's doing really, really well. I'm excited about it. Or you can shoot me a message on Instagram if you want a personalized copy. Just we'll work it out. So
right
yeah,
on, man. We'll sync it all up because I know the guy. I'm gonna get a ton of messages, which I'm grateful for. I'm gonna get a ton of messages. Hopefully, you're gonna get a ton of messages from people who've heard your story and resonate with what you're sharing. Man, I appreciate you. It takes a lot of guts and courage to be able to do what you do. And I'm not just talking about military, law enforcement, firefight. I'm talking about, I think, the infinitely harder work, which is being true to yourself, exposing yourself, sharing this stuff that is just not comfortable to share. So I really appreciate your willingness to do this, man.
yeah, man, it's my honor. And like I say in this book, and we didn't have that much time to cover it, obviously, but I talk about it in depth about the monster that I truly became in this book and how it affects everybody around you. And our first inkling is to, start casting judgment on other people versus looking inward at ourselves. And I think that's a big part of the message in my book, and that I think is very important for, men such as ourselves, how we can do better, and people around us, lift them up versus beating them down.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, Travis, appreciate you, man. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it, bro.